All right, so handling phoning objections. So if you guys could do me a favor, throw all the phoning objections that you got that you've ever gotten in the chat box. Give me some objections to work with here. Great, we don't have time. Just bought knives. We don't want to buy anything. It's softball season. Yes, it is. All right. Before we dive into this, I think it's a really good thing to review the objection cycle. And somehow I lost my pad of sticky notes. We'll use this. What's up, Staley? Yawning. Um, okay. Seen the presentations 4 or 5 times. Don't want to sit through the presentations. I'll buy some stuff though. Yeah, that's a fun one. Um, I mean, that's an objection I'd take any day. Be like, all right, cool, whatever, Mr. Jones. But let's go through a couple of the keys to the objection cycles. There's two ways you can handle objections, two formats, if you will. Okay. There's feel, felt, found. So let's talk about feel, felt, found. Which is probably not necessarily the one you're going to use on the phone. I'll tell you the other one really on the phone after this, but I think it's good to go through feel, felt, found. So feel, felt, found is a way to handle an objection. It's kind of an objection cycle. And if you think about it, when people have an objection, people don't do anything because they understand what they're, well, I'll say this. People don't buy, if we go from a sales perspective, people don't buy because they understand what they're buying necessarily. They buy because they feel understood. So hearing people and making sure they feel heard is the first part of handling any objection. So if Mrs. Jones says, hey, that homemaker said it's too much today, we can't get it. Hey, Mrs. Jones, I understand how you feel. 1613 is a lot of money to spend all at once. A lot of people felt that way. So you want to make sure they don't feel alone in their objection. It's like, hey, you're not alone. You're not abnormal. It's very normal. You know, feel that. A lot of people have felt that way, Mrs. Jones. What we found is that when they put it on the 5-pay, it only comes out to be 337. It's a lot more reasonable. So what do you think? Would you like to go ahead and get that today? That's feel, felt, found. So Isla, if you know, listen to the conversation that, you know, they had the other day with, you know, one of our representatives, it's like, hey, I understand where you're coming from. I felt that way too when I was brand new. You know, what I found was this. So ask for the order. That's feel, felt, found. So it's a really easy way to do this or to do that. The other way you can do this, which is probably a little bit better structure to handle on the phone, is there's 4 keys or 4 steps to the objection cycle. And it's similar, but a little less feel felt, but it's a little less, I don't know if touchy feely is the right way, but here we go. Step number 1 is to empathize. Okay. Step number 1 is to empathize with their objection. Hey, I understand where you're coming from. So same thing with the feel. I hear where you're coming from. So Mrs. Jones says, hey, we're just really busy right now. You know, it's softball season. So you want to empathize, and you could also say this, agree with feelings. Agree with feelings. Okay, you're not agreeing with their objection, you're agreeing with their feelings about the objection, right? So if Mrs. Jones, back to easy one, homemaker says, oh yeah, the homemaker says it's just too much for the budget right now. You're not going to say, yeah, Mrs. Jones, you're right, it is too much for your budget. It's, hey, I understand where you're coming from. 1613 is a lot all at once. Number 2 is however. Sometimes however is implied, and sometimes and oftentimes I just like to say however. Okay. However is the explicit word there. Now here's the thing with however. It's good to use the word however, because however means yes and, not but. Right? It doesn't negate what they just said. So if I say, hey, Mr. Jones, I completely understand where you're coming from. 1613 is a lot all at once. But what you should do, right, but if I say, however, what most people do, so three is solve the problem, tell the truth. That's step three. Solve the problem slash tell the truth. And then number four is AFTO. Just ask for the order again, or in this case, ask for the demo. So if we use the structure for Mrs. Jones, it says, I'm really busy. It's softball season. I don't have enough time to do a demo with you. Hey, Mrs. Jones, I totally get what it's like to be busy. How many kids do you have? You guys must be traveling to St. George and like all over the place for like softball stuff. Cool. And by the way, you're kind of like building a rapport in there and like, hey, listen, I totally get where you're coming from. However, Mrs. Jones, uh, tell the truth. My goal is to get, 15 appointments by Monday night. I can make sure to keep it short. That's to solve the problem. So is that a bad day or just a bad time? Request for more information. Is that a bad day or just a bad time? You know, okay, so it's just a bad day. Yeah, I'm sure like with softball tournaments and stuff, the weekends are super busy. Mrs. Jones, here's another tell the truth. This is something you can say. I'm willing to do appointments. Oh, looks like my computer froze. I'm willing to do appointments as early as 6 a.m. to midnight in order to keep on track in order to hit my goal. How bad did that freeze for you guys? Ish. Okay. So I'll restate that again. Um, so another thing that you can say is like, hey, Mrs. Jones, so it sounds like weekends are busy for you. And again, telling the truth. Here's what I used to tell the customers, Mrs. Jones, I'm willing to do an appointment as early as 6 a.m. or as late as 12 p.m. in order to hit this goal of getting 15 appointments in by Monday night. So is there any way you could squeeze me in, on Tuesday afternoon at 5 o'clock, or do you think 6:30 would be better for you? Right? Or would Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday morning be better for you? And you narrow it down to two chunks of times, and then you can give two specific times within that chunk. She's like, well, probably Wednesday morning. Great, Mrs. Jones. Would 9:30 or would 11 o'clock be better? Does that make sense? So those are a few things you can keep up your sleeve there. Now, a few things to break that down, by the way. Share your goal again, right? That's part of like the telling the truth and solving the problem. However, my goal is to do it because, like, here's the thing, just because they say they're busy doesn't change your goal, right? And so by restating your goal, they know that you're somebody, it's not pushy at all. It's just, Mrs. Jones, I am working really hard. I'm willing to, you know, I'm working hard to do these appointments. What can we do to find a solution, basically? You know, so I'm working really hard to get 12 appointments by Monday night. Is that a bad day or just a bad time? Sure, you're probably more busy on the weekends. Hey, I've got a chunk of time Tuesday night, or do you think Wednesday morning would be better for you? Wednesday morning, great. Would 9 or 11:30 or 10:30 work better? Anthony, does that help a little bit with that objection? Cool. Here's something else that I'll say. When you phone, you should always have your objection. So that's the structure of it. The great news is that you also have this handling questions on the phone section of your phoning. So anytime you make phone calls at any time in your career, you should have your phone script pulled up, and I'd have it pulled up right here. And then I'd have the objections, and I would read through the objections really quick before you make phone calls. So that way, if customers say, hey, I'm super busy, hey, no problem, Mrs. Jones. I get what it's like to be busy. I love this too. That's why I'll be in and out before you know it. So could you, and by the way, you can read this right here. You should always read this with as much fun as possible. So Ms. Jones, can you squeeze me in there at 3 o'clock, or do you think 5 o'clock would be better for you? She's like, all right, at least Anthony's entertaining. What other objections did we have here? I've seen the demo 4 or 5 times. Let's see, where's that one? That's great, Mrs. Jones. You could probably do it better than me. All I got to do is walk through some things on the website, so you can give me some pointers. Here's another one you could say, Anthony, with that. I had to write this down for phoning. I promise I'm a heck of a lot funnier than the last guy, even if it's just because I'm funny looking. I'm a little self-deprecating humor in there. Mr. Jones, I promise I'm a heck of a lot funnier than the last guy, even if it's just because I'm funnier looking. It would really help me out with my scholarship and my goal this week. My chance of my scholarship this summer and my goals this week. So would 3:30 or 5 o'clock be better for you? If they say I don't want to sit through the presentation, I'll buy some stuff though. Perfect, Mrs. Jones. I can just do an abbreviated presentation for you. It'd still make sense to schedule a time. And then speaking of which, Anthony, like if you have a customer, let's say my grandma Wes, for example, who funny enough, my first cousin sold Cutco on for me 2020. All right, his younger sister's boyfriend just heard about the job and is now on our team. So that's funny. So he's calling all the same people back 4 years later. By the way, these are people I should have called 9 years ago, but I was too chicken crap to call them. And they bought homemakers and galleys and stuff, whatever. So call your chicken list. But it's also he's gonna call Grandma Wes back, and Grandma Wes is gonna be like, "Yeah, I have galley said just I want to buy some more Cutco." Marcus should still schedule an appointment with her. Now, whether he goes through the whole, I'm just I gotta be careful how I say this. You should always do the full presentation if the customer will let you. But even if the customer's like, listen, I don't have a lot of time. I just want it. Great. Still set up the appointment, walk him through the gifts and accessories and make a quick wish list with them. Right. That still makes sense. And you can do a presentation in 35 to 50 minutes pretty easily just by going through everything, putting it in the cart. So I'd still schedule an appointment with them. Let's see, what were some of the other objections that you got? Oh, we just bought knives. That's basically I'm not interested or I'm not going to buy. So no problem, Mrs. Jones. You don't need to be interested. I still get credit for showing you. Sure, you already have knives. Most people do. See that subtle thing that I just said there? Sure, you already have knives. Most people do. Right? It's like you're not alone. Everybody else they schedule appointments with usually has knives as well. So it's like not a big deal. I promise I'll keep it quick and be helping out big time with my goal this week. So can you squeeze me in really quick at 3:30 or would 5 o'clock be better for you? If they say I'm not going to buy, no problem, Mrs. Jones. Still helps me out towards my goals just by listening. I'll be in and out before you know it. I do need to get, a couple more in by Monday night. So would 5:30 or 6 o'clock be better for you? Here's what I'll say: the more confidently and the quicker necessary, and you don't want to like bulldoze the objection, but the more confident and the more, but the more quicker, because you are comfortable and you're familiar with the objections that you handle the objection, the more the customer knows that like I'm a professional, this is what I do, and and I'm serious about hitting my goals. And when that's the case, people respect that. They totally do. They're like, oh, well, he just handled my objection. He's got to go. All right, fine. Yeah, we'll book up a demo. Whereas if somebody says, oh no, we because too busy. Oh no, that's no problem. It's okay. Maybe I'll call you back another day. And they're like, okay, yeah, whatever. Nobody wants to do a demo with a simp, right? Maybe that's not a good term to use, but nobody wants to do demo with somebody who's like wimpy and uh not doesn't have any conviction in what they do. In their mind, it's just reassuring them that they're like, oh yeah, we probably didn't want to do a demo with that guy anyway. It would have just been 45 minutes of him just peeing his pants in the demo. But if you're confidently asking for the order and handling objections, then they're like, all right, we respect him. He's a good negotiator. It'll be a good appointment. By the way, the best thing to do, I sometimes be afraid of like handling the objection because what if they still said no? Who freaking cares? You're not going to say yes if you don't handle the objection. So you got to handle the objection. If they still say no, it's like, great, who cares who's next? Here's what I'll say though, especially when you're like calling recommendations. If you're booking over 50% of the people you talk to that are not your initial list or your acquaintance list, chicken list, if they're like straight up recommendations, if you're booking 50% of the people you're talking to, like that's where you should be at minimum. But if you do a good job handling the objections, you should be booking 2 out of 3 people you talk to. So you're doing a great job when you get 3 people on the phone that are straight up recommendations, you're booking 2 out of 3 of them. Now, in today's world, I'm actually it should probably be a little bit more than that because they're sending the heads up texts. and you're probably calling people that already have your phone number, have had a text that you're already going to be calling. So it should probably be 3/4 of the people that you call say yes. Um, but if you ever get, by the way, here's a good rule of thumb. If you ever get two people in a row that say no and you're ever 0 for 2 on like booking demos with people you talk to, call me. Hey Jesse, I just had two people say no to a demo. What did I do wrong? And then we'll like role play the phone approach and be like, oh, okay, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just bad luck. Or, oh, here's a quick tip. By the way, Staley does such a great job at asking questions and digging a little deeper and looking for that extra tidbit of information that's like, that's a tool I can use, keep in my toolbox and implement. Any other questions about handling objections on the phone? Staley, go for it.
Do you have any tips on how to get the them together to kind of if you're like just talking to the husband or whatnot, and you kind of feel like it's just going to be them, or you picked a time that maybe their husband's at work. How can you kind of increase the chances that you can get them together?
That's a really good question. Because you do want to do as many couple appointments as you can. So if I'm booking a demo with the husband, um, I'm always gonna ask like, uh, hey, it's always and you would just say this in the phone approach, hey, it's always best when I'm able to show spouses together or couples together. Is the boss gonna be available at that time, or is your wife gonna be available at that time? Oh, she's not. Oh, is there a better time that we'd be able to do an appointment? So sometimes it's just as simple as asking that. Um, And same thing with the wife. Uh, you know, hey, Mrs. Jones, by the way, is your husband available at that time? Oh, he's not. Like you kind of have to make the call sometimes. Sometimes it's like, all right, hey, no worries. We're still good because you're trying to book maybe your morning appointments on like a Wednesday. Likelihood of getting couples together and like at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday is pretty low. And I'm okay with that sometimes, right? But if I'm trying to book up a lot of evening appointments and I definitely want to see couples together, then it's, hey, Mrs. Jones, is your husband able to be there? Hey, no worries. It's always a lot more fun when I'm able to see couples together. Is there, what does his work schedule kind of look like? And you can just ask just a few more questions. Is there a better time where I'd be able to see it? Is like Tuesday evening or Thursday evening work better for you? So, I can't think of anything else beyond that. Here's what I will say. There are some times in your schedule that just by virtue of when they are, you'll sell more Cutco on those appointments. So in a push period situation, you'll hear this summer during SC1 and SC2, um, especially coming up with our push period in May. There's some money sign demos that we typically will bold in the schedule, and they're usually appointments that happen after 5 p.m. in weekend mornings. So I'd say this, you do a demo with a couple at like somewhere between 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning, your statistical likelihood of selling a homemaker set or selling a set goes up quite a bit. Why? Nothing's had a chance to go wrong yet on a Saturday morning. So if it's me, like I was always, as a student, I was always willing to work Saturday mornings, but even the summer times, it was like I'd work Saturday mornings and like take Wednesday afternoon off or something like that, just because I knew that maximizing the appointments, those times where I could get couples together, was worth it for me and for my schedule. And then the evening demo times, the 6 o'clock, the 7:30, and the 9 o'clock demo times were always really good too. And here's something that you can say. You can say, hey, Mrs. Jones, can I do a demo for you, tomorrow night at 6:30, or do you think, or excuse me, 7 o'clock, or do you think hang on, what did I say? 6, 7:30, 9? Would 7:30 or do you think 9 o'clock after the kids have gone to bed be better for you? I think some of you have heard me say that before, but like my wife, after having been with little kids all day long, if you want to come over and hang out at 9 o'clock, she would have a blast just chatting it up. Right? I like you got friends who are like young moms, and it's the same, it's like, wait, you want to do like adult things like after 9 o'clock, and I've also like if you take the fact that let's say you do an appointment for somebody who's um not a member of like our predominant faith in Utah, 9 o'clock at night, dude, they got a glass of wine and life is good. Like, or they're cracking a beer and they're relaxed, they feel good. They're like, you want to shop with me? Sure, yeah, come over. I'll spend some money. Like, this is a great time. You just get to hang out with them. So, that's another good time. So if you can maximize, so here's what I'll say, Staley, to answer your question in short form. If you can maximize some Saturday morning demos here and there, and then maximize maybe 1 or 2 evenings a week, depending on how much you want to work. You might want to be in the camp this summer where you're like, hey, I want to get up in the mornings, be on Champions Club from like 8 to 9:30. I'm gonna go back to bed till noon. I'm gonna hang out with my friends and like all afternoon, and then I'm just gonna do 2 3 appointments in the evening times and then like go to bed. Right? You could do that all summer long, still sell 50, 60 grand this summer. You don't have to. Some of you probably want to leave your evenings and weekends open for certain things. But if you can maximize 1 or 2 nights a week where maybe you decide to do some demos and then like a Saturday morning, you'll get some more you'll get some more appointments. How many times do you call someone that never answers before you stop reaching out? Great question. Anthony, tell the answer. Yeah. I had a lady named Margaret Larson. I called her maybe 100 times. Summer 2016. You guys may have heard this story too. And I remember being in the Salt Lake City office. I used to show up every single morning, make phone calls with Frank, and we would book demos. And I remember I used to call her because I'd been recommended to her like five different people. Because I was like doing appointments with a bunch of ladies that I'd been recommended to in the same neighborhood. And they're all like, have you seen Margaret yet? I'm like, no. They're like, oh, she's great. So I finally get a hold of her. She like answers the phone in August. And I'm like, holy crap, Margaret Larson, how the heck are you? And she's like, who is this? Like, my name's Jesse. I've been recommended to you by like 6 different ladies in the neighborhood. They say you were the nicest lady in the ward. She's like, oh, that's true. Uh, she was fun. And I went over and she bought 5 knives, gave me five. She did the pick five, got the 4 table knives for free, gave me some recommendations. It was a great demo. So here's what I would do. Anthony, in today's world, we have the text in the app, right? So if I call somebody and they don't answer 2 or 3 times, I'm gonna send the follow-up text. You guys remember that one in the app? What I love about the follow-up text, and I'm friends with our national recruiting manager. There's the introduction, okay, but there's also the follow-up. And if I'm calling people, I really like the follow-up for this reason. Says, hey, this is Jesse. I got a quick question for you. Are you available? If not, I'll try again later. What that does is it leaves the door open for me to keep calling in the future. Now, let's say that I've like texted him that like 4 times and I've never got a response. Anthony, I'll probably leave it. Right. Um, So I guess in today's world, it'd probably come down to how many times have I called them and then texted them? Because if I've texted them 4 times and I've gotten radio silence, they're probably not going to answer the phone. So 100% I like, yeah, would you send that text to someone you don't know personally? Yeah, if I've been recommended to them, I definitely call. You could edit that text slightly, by the way. Hey, well, this one says, hey, this is Jesse. And you can say I'm friends with, enter your customer's name. I'm friends with Sally. I've got a quick question for you. Are you available? Are you available? If not, I'll try again later. Yeah. So that leaves the door open there. Any other questions? Go for it, Staley.
Anthony's question kind of reminded me. I have had like 1 or 2 people where it's like this back and forth where they're like, okay, yeah, we're too like, um, we schedule it and then it falls through and we schedule it, but it gets to the point where you feel like every time you call them, they like look at the phone and they see your name, they're like, ugh, they're just gonna try to book it like this demo we've tried to book 6 times. Like, is there a way to like avoid that to make it like to make the follow-up appointments not feel like now I know exactly what they're calling about, less urgency. Is there a way to set that up better?
Yeah, that's a great question. Trina's giggling too because she's like, "Yep, had that happen before." And we all end up with a customer like that here and there, so it's normal that that happens. Here's what I'll say: if you firm it up really well the first or second time, um, it keeps that from happening because I could see that like once you've had to reschedule with them like a third or fourth time, it's just going to be like perpetually like kind of not as important. But when I firm up with somebody, right, and I'm reading the script and I'm like, "Hey, Mrs. Jones," and let's go through the script really quick. Thanks a ton. This really means a lot to me. Do you have a piece of paper and a pen nearby? Can you write it down? Will your husband be available too? Hey, Mrs. Jones, here's a phrase that used to be in the script. We took it out for our brand new reps because it wasn't as necessary, but it's absolutely necessary with um especially when you're calling acquaintances or recommendations. Let's see. How much means can I grab your email address? Laptop or computer? Is it in one of these? Nope, it's not. So here's what I would say. And I'll put this in the chat box and you can write this down. In order to keep my schedule full, I plan on having all of my times booked. Are you sure that time definitely works for you? Staley, that would be a phrase I would use with that customer in particular. Or if I've got a customer who's sounding a little wishy-washy on the phone, she's like, well, call me on Saturday. We'll see. Hey, Mrs. Jones, thank you so first of all, it's like, thank you for being willing to schedule an appointment. I do plan on like in order to keep my schedule full, I do plan on having all my like my times booked since I've got my demos booked back to back. Are you sure that time definitely works for you? If not, can we find another time? Basically, what you're saying, Staley, is if you're going to cancel on me, Mrs. Jones, can we just do this right now? That way we don't have to play this like phone tag game back and forth and you feel bad for canceling on me and I feel awkward for calling you again. So there's absolutely no problem with that kind of transparency. So in order to keep my schedule full, plan on all my times being booked. Are you sure that time definitely works for you? She's like, yeah, okay, yeah, we can do that time. Thank you so much, by the way. This really does help me out with my goals. I really look forward to catching up to you, getting to meeting you, Mrs. Jones. You know, my customer Sally said that you were so nice and that, you know, so I'm excited to meet you. I'll look forward to seeing you at 5 o'clock on Friday or whatever. Does that help? That's an extra little line you can slip in there to firm up. Okay,
Jesse, can I say something real quick too?
please. Yep.
With this one, was it Staley that asked the question?
Yep.
So with this one, definitely what Jesse told you, 100% right now. And Jesse, if you feel like this is like advanced version and they don't need to know this yet, let me know. But what I do is I make a joke about wasting their time. Hey, Mrs. Jones, can you write this down? Because I really wouldn't want to waste your time. And I'm laughing through the whole thing. I'm like, I really don't want to waste your time. So if you could just write that down because honestly, it's going to be so hard for you to reschedule. And I don't even make it about me. I make it about them.
Yeah. You could say something like that, like, "Hey, Mrs. Jones, I don't want to waste your time having to reschedule. Uh, that just makes more of a headache for both of us. Are you sure that time definitely works?" Right. And so that's just a situation where you're just stating the facts, telling the truth. You know, let's firm something up this way. And the more clear you can be with that, right? That shows, by the way, that builds trust. I don't know if you inherently notice it, but what that does is like Staley says what he says what he means, right? Or like Anthony speaks it the way it is. So I can trust people that articulate their thoughts clearly in that way. Does that make sense? There's no shady things here, Mrs. Jones. I don't want to waste your time. And it really does help me out. Are you sure that time definitely works? So yeah, that's great. Cool. Well, guys, great Champions Club.